Comics.
Because they have no home.
I'm Joe Getcho, and I've got turtle power!
Turtle power! Cowabunga!
Cowabunga!
And I'm Mike White. And this is the Clean Comic Book Podcast. We like comics because they have no bones. Find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics 1. And use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to join the conversation and share your thoughts.
That's right. And today's boneless review actually has bones, but it also has shells. Man, I love being a turtle. It is about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Villains, a collaborative micro-series by various writers and artists, which was published in 2013 by IDW. This is my villainous voice for the turtles.
I am the Shredder.
The Shredder. I'll get you next time. Turtles. I got you for 3 minutes. Okay. And since this is a micro series, each issue we're going to, it has a different story. So it's got a different villain, different story for each issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down a little bit differently than we usually do by giving you a brief summary of each issue along with a discussion and rating of that issue. And then we'll talk overall in the second part. So we're going to do this a little bit differently, but just go with the flow, man. Eat some pizza and say cowabunga if you get lost.
So again, as a reminder, because there's 8 issues, we've actually broken our review into 2 separate episodes. So in this episode, which is part 1 of 2, we're going to cover Krang, Baxter, Stockman, Old Hob, and Alopex.
We like
Comics.
Let's get right into it. The first issue is Krang. And the script is by Joshua Williamson with art by Mike Henderson. Before we sort of begin to get into the story, Joshua Williamson is one of the few creators that I'm actually very familiar with of the people that are working on these stories today. So he wrote The Flash, I think, for almost 100 issues. And he also is kind of one of the architects of the direction that the overall universe had been going at DC for the last several years. So he was planning events, Dark Crisis, and also I think Night Terrors was another event that he was in charge of. So I'm very familiar with him because he's been like a big presence at DC recently.
Big name. That's cool.
So Krang, the crown prince of planet Ultromanon, and you can correct me in the comments. Ultromanon.
Yes.
You can correct me if I said that wrong. Krang, the crown prince of that planet, recalls his early days on his homeworld. He is the spoiled son of Emperor Kwanin, and he wanted for nothing, but he didn't really have his father's respect. So when we meet Krang and they kind of show him in the past, he's kind of a spoiled brat. He's telling people to bring him his walker and his different monitors and stuff so he can play video games. But during a mission to kill Kwanin's ancient nemesis Traxxas, Krang stowed away aboard a ship, intending to earn his father's favor. But shortly after the mission begins, the entire hunting party is executed as Traxxas had foreseen their plan. So Krang was left alone on planet Morbus.
It's Morbid time!
But instead of whining, as he always did before, he kind of resolved to survive. So we kind of get into his mindset a little bit where he's like, you know what? I actually have been weak. I actually have been useless. But now, like, I'm the only one that lived through this. So that must be because I have something special. So he kind of has an ego about it, but he's also kind of growing a little bit as a character. So
he's enlarging his brain.
Yeah, he's enlarging his brain. Which is his body. It's perfect for us to make Space Ghost references.
Yes.
So that's great. So using his wits and a crude wooden spear, Krang actually managed to survive for months. And he eventually reveals himself to General Traxxas. Traxxas, underestimating Krang's resolve, was killed really quickly, actually. And Krang promptly took charge of his army because it's one of those, oh, you killed our leader, now you're in charge. Kind of like whoever wears green ribbon is green leader for the Drazi. So
purple leader, purple Drazi. Well, what if I take purple and put on green? And then they fight.
And then they all start fighting. Yeah, so it's like one of those warrior cultures where they're like, well, you defeated Traxxas, so you are our king.
Keep what you
Krang.
kill.
So yeah, exactly. So when Quanon finally arrives on Morbus personally, he had to finally give his son respect because he's now basically taken over the entire planet and he has an army at his command.
Mm-hmm.
And in kind of a gross twist, Krang was like, I want to keep General Traxxas's body because I'm going to use his corpse as body armor.
Yes.
So in at least in the IDW continuity, Krang's body armor is Traxxas's body. And I looked up a few other appearances just to be sure, like, is that consistent? And like, yeah, they always draw it the same. So that's like a part of and sort of the traditional body armor that we're used to seeing. That's what Quanon wears, the one from the animated series. So then in the present, because there's actually a framing device for this story, Krang kills an underling with his bare hands, proving that he's never lost his edge, even without his armor. And that pretty much wraps up the narrative explanation for Krang.
That was a fun story because it's like almost made me think of Gohan in the wilderness, where it's like, you know, you just get thrown into something and you're like, oh, I'm not ready for this. But he survived. And he had this moment where it's like, what do I do now that I survived? And he's like, I'm going to kill my people's mortal enemy, and then I'm going to wear his body as armor, as a suit. Like, whoa, dude. Talk about overcompensating. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, his flip happens kind of quick, and I guess it can be explained by, like, he was in an extreme situation and he basically had to adapt or die. I mean, those were kind of his two options.
Yeah.
They talk a lot about how Morbus is like this inhospitable environment with like acid pits and it's like hard to breathe and all this stuff. But there wasn't a lot of expansion on that. I don't know that we really needed it, but I felt like there were a lot of things that it was kind of like, because it was a one shot, we just had to kind of get to it and show his advancement as a character.
It wasn't as much about how he survived, but the fact of that is a part of his story, which defined his character later on, because he went through this grueling experience where he thought he was, you know, he knew he was more than the kingdom was treating him. And so he went to go prove himself. And not only did he prove himself, but he found kind of like a primal version of himself out there in the wilderness that he then said, this is who I am, and this is what I will be. And that's it.
It was kind of like Green Arrow. Isn't he, like, he was spoiled and then he went to the island?
Yeah.
And he became this like amazing warrior.
But that's a good point, though, is like, there's a choice there where it's like Krang basically went through what Green Arrow did, but instead of saying I'm going to be a hero and be a benevolent billionaire, like we said in the Green Arrow episode, and help the little guy, Krang was like, this is great. Now I have more power to be able to step on the little guy. So very different approach there with the same sort of experience.
One thing I like about this one too is that I think that it sets the tone nicely for the entire micro series, because it's going to sort of be a trend that you'll see as we go through these reviews, that a lot of the characters start out as kind of an underdog, and then we see them sort of rise above their circumstances to become the version that's sort of more recognizable to fans. So in that regard, I think this one was pretty satisfying, because you do see some kind of character growth. I mean, we didn't see a whole lot of the before Krang, but it was still enough that you kind of get the idea that, like, oh, wow, like he was just a spoiled brat and like he sucked and everything. And so even though he turns into like this cruel overlord, you in an odd way find yourself kind of like rooting for him a little bit. Because you're like, well, I want to see him, you know, become better. Although his version of better is worse for everyone else, I guess. But
well, that's the thing, though. It's like he started off as somebody who looked at other people as, you should serve me, you should submit to me, and they laughed at him. So then he went through this experience to get the ability to bring anyone to their knees who would ever laugh at him again. So it's kind of like the nerd becomes the bully kind of thing, except that he was never good to begin with. And I think that's the important distinction, is he started off as a bad guy. and he went through an experience that made him a villain. But that doesn't mean that, like, oh, if Oliver Queen and Krang had switched circumstances, they would have turned out like each other. Well, no, it's like Mr. Miracle
Right.
and the New Gods. It's like, is it the
Right.
upbringing or is it the person? And I think in our story here, it's really the character that was that way from the
Yeah.
beginning. Like Kingpin,
He
where it's
was.
like, I'm bored and I need to take out my own guards because I'm bored. Hey, you come over here. Well,
So
yikes.
that I think was one of the that leads me to actually one of the criticisms I had of the story, where I felt like, especially with this one, I felt it more than the others, where I would have preferred that they just drop the framing device of Krang going, like one of his henchmen failed him and he invites him in and he tells him a story and then he kills him. And that's how we sort of get the lead into his story. But I felt like we didn't really need any of that, and we could have had more sort of story development showing either more part of how he survived on Morbus and took control,
Hmm.
or more of Quanin's reaction. How did he eventually oust Quanin and like take over? Like that would have been satisfying to see. And those things might be in the main TMNT title. That's the drawback of doing it this way, is like I don't know what they've already shown in the main book.
Yeah.
But I really felt like the framing device, especially in this one, took away page time from what they could have used to just let's just tell the backstory.
Hmm.
So
I think that's why they did that, though, is because they probably looked at this as this is a piece of a much larger universe. So, in order to tell
mhm.
this story, what we're going to do is we're going to frame it within the larger universe and say, this was a moment in time that we never saw because he killed the henchman that he told this to. So, we never saw this, but here's his version, his telling, and it gives us a way to experience it without justifying how does this fit within continuity. Because the other thing is, if Krang
Yeah,
is the one driving the narrative, like with Doctor Doom, how do we know what is really, true and false? It's all from his perspective. So it,
right.
it could have been very differently in reality, but this is the version that we get, based on what he says, which could be, I mean, it could be even completely wrong because he was going to kill the guy. So maybe he just wanted to tell a fun story. Like, I like this part of me. I'm going to spin you a yarn. And then,
Well, I did like the sort of symmetry of there's a moment in the story where he kills Traxxas, which if you guys don't know, Traxxas is like oh, what's that other character? General Trag or whatever. If you've seen the sort of like stone people alien race that are from the Ninja Turtles universe in some of the video games, that's the race that they are. The ones with like the green helmet and like they're made of like rocks
yeah.
and whatever. That's sort of the race that seem to be the enemies of the Utrom. Um so it at first when he just killed him with like a wooden stake that he'd made, I was kind of like, that was kind of anticlimactic.
Mm,
But it was nice to have the symmetry with him strangling the guard at the end without using his walker, without using anything, to kind of show like he's a threat and he's savage, even if he doesn't have all of his technology and
right.
stuff. And so I guess I did appreciate it from that standpoint of kind of showing, yeah, like he's not just his suit, like he's
Right.
more than that.
Well,
So
it's almost like his mind is his weapon, like literally and figuratively, because
yeah.
he's smart, but also because he's a giant brain. So even as a giant brain, his giant brain muscle can hurt people. So his mind is his deadliest weapon because he has no body, which is his mind, which is his brain. Wrap your brain around that.
It's funny too, something that I excuse me, something I didn't think about, but that just occurred to me now while we're discussing it, was he feels like a more threatening and distinct character from the version that I know from the animated series. Because
Yeah.
in that, he sort of had that voice like this, and I'll destroy you, Turtles.
Oh
And I didn't
no.
really get that sort of, it didn't sound like that would be his voice in this story. Like he seemed like he
Yeah.
was to be taken more seriously. So the only other discussion point I really had was, do you like the Dimension X side of Ninja Turtles? Because this is like they have aliens like the Utrom and the Triceratons and all of those guys. And that's a very sort of different side of their
Hmm.
universe as opposed to all the street level guys that they're fighting most of the time, like the
Yeah.
Shredder and Old Hob and stuff like that.
I think, if you kind of look at the Turtles as like a representation or like an amalgamation of other comic ideas sort of all rolled into one,
Mhm.
because you have the foot instead of the hand, like in Daredevil. You have the mutants, like in X-Men and all those different kinds of things.
Sure.
So Dimension X is like Dimension Z or insert
Sure.
whatever reality that, that
The
brand of
negative
comic uses.
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
various different things. So I think that it's kind of just the natural extension of, okay, so we have the turtles, we have the mutants, we have what goes on Earth,
Mhm.
but then we have the bigger threats, the ones that come from other dimensions. So I kind of feel like it's just a natural extension of storytelling to go that direction. But that being said, like I feel like it almost detracts from the main core of the turtles, which is about the mutations and what you do with what you're given, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because it's like they all share this ooze in common, but even as you'll see in the other episodes or the other issues, is how do they use what they've been given? And the turtles are kind of like the prime example, especially Splinter, where it's like they're given this incredible gift and they help people and they rescue people. And so going to the Dimension X thing, I feel like takes them beyond the street level stuff, like throwing Spider-Man into a war with Galactus. Like putting aside that what's he going to do besides try to,
Right.
thwip him in the eyes, good luck with that. But
Right.
also it's like, well, Spider-Man can't get his head around this because it's such a big galactic thing that's not
Yeah.
how he does things. The way he does things is more personal. So kind of like with the Turtles, I see them more that way, where it's like, I think
Yeah.
Dimension X kind of pulls us away from what the core of what makes them cool. Do you agree with that
I
or think
think I
differently?
think I mostly agree. I One thing I have really noticed and begun to enjoy about Turtles comics though is that it feels like they have a very strong supporting cast, whether those are
Hmm.
villains or just how much the universe behind them is fleshed out
Yeah.
is really good. And it makes it feel like this is a unique comic book universe. It's separate
Hmm.
from Marvel and DC. It's got its own rules, it's got its own things. But that said, yeah, making the stakes like the fate of the universe and something like that feels like a little bit too big for the Ninja Turtles. So I think it's fun maybe for them to dip into that every once in a while, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
want like an entire 12 issue saga where they're in space for the entire time. And, it just seems like that would, yeah, it would take them a little bit too far from their roots.
Unless you're going to do a
So,
story like Turtles in Space, and it's that 12 issues is a limited series run, and it's not something that
sure.
we do every couple of years. Treat it
Yeah.
like Krang is like the main event because it takes them out of their comfort zone, they have to get out of their shells. Well,
Hmm.
not literally because that would hurt, but and fight this threat. But like Krang is like a regular ongoing villain, like every episode would be like, yeah, I think would just
Yeah. It
totally
would it
detract
would
from
get
it.
old pretty quick.
So I guess, do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to say on the Krang issue before we move to the next?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of covered my one gripe and yeah, all that. So no, I think we're good.
All right.
We like
Comic. Let's get ready to fly
Let's get
with
ready to fly.
Baxter Stock Guy. Well, he's not a stock guy, as you'll see momentarily. Lorelei. Oh wait, okay. Too many things happening there. Yes. So let us
Lorelei.
talk about Baxter
You can,
Stockman.
I was just gonna say you can tell when one or both of us have had coffee before we start recording because like I can tell that both of our energy level is like higher than a lot of times
But
right now.
isn't that
So
more like interesting to watch than if we were just
yes.
like, yeah, there was a comic.
Yes, it is.
Animation. Turtle power. Woo! Okay. Yes, Baxter Stockman with the script by Eric Burnham and art by Andy Kuhn. So this is another one that has a script, whereas most of the other issues say written by. So a script
Hmm.
is where there's multiple. I looked this up because I wanted to know why. A script is when there's different people who are attributed to the writing, but they kind of pick one person who's the overall writer because the artist can, just influence the writing by what they draw, but they can also take an active participant in the writing and say, hey, well, what if we wrote it this way? Because then I could do a cool action shot. So usually when it says script by, there's kind of like a main writer, and then there's other people who contributed that they don't want to necessarily name every single person, or at least as far as I could
Okay.
tell on Google. So, but
I
that was
wondered if
interesting.
I wondered if that meant that there was some editorial direction or mandate put
So
on the writer as well.
yeah, that could be because this issue picks up right after Krang's issue. Well, not right
Mhm.
after time-wise, but it's the next one in the series and it deals with Krang. Krang is in it. So
Right.
that kind of made me think that maybe they wanted to have the connective tissue, not brain tissue, but
Hmm.
connective tissue between the two stories, whereas the other ones didn't. I don't know, but something
Yeah.
just kind of on the periphery that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it
But
is.
yes, that something that bugged me, haha, like Baxter Stockman, who is stuck as the tech lackey on the build of Kang's terrifying Technodrome, which Krang plans to use to terraform Earth into a more suitable habitat for his people. But while Krang's dad saw Krang as weak, Baxter's dad raised Baxter to reject luck and win by strategic thinking. So he really is using his mind over his
Mhm.
brawn. And everything he does is driven by cold, calculated logic. Inspired by insect colonies, he creates the Flyborg, an insect machine hybrid that ends up way stronger and smarter than he expected. And it even goes full Frankenstein's monster. But Baxter's still in control of its machine components, and he tells the Flyborg its brain only works because he allows it. So he enforces his superiority right there on his creation. He also uses the Flyborg to sneak a Trojan horse into the Technodrome systems and extract Krang's secret plans. And then we get a final flashback that shows us that this isn't Baxter's first power play. When he was younger, he actually outmaneuvered his own father and staged a takeover of his dad's company. So this is somebody who thinks strategically, who's very calculating, who doesn't do things because of emotion. He does it because it's a means to an end, and this is the end that I'm looking for. So that's why he has no problems creating a Flyborg, which sounds kind of goofy on the surface, but actually was really cool in the comic. Did you think the Flyborg was cooler than it sounded?
It's funny because I don't know why, but in my brain, for some reason, I thought that Baxter himself mutated and became half man, half fly. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's a change for the IDW comics or if it's a change for like just the comics versus the animated series, or if maybe I just misunderstood how it plays
Maybe
out.
you saw the
My
movie
main
The Fly,
experience, yeah.
and that was
Well, I thought about that too. The Brundlefly is like they were trying to invent a transporter, I think.
yeah,
And the
something.
fly goes in there with Jeff Goldblum, and
Oh,
then
that's Jeff
it like
Goldblum?
fuses their yeah, it's Jeff Goldblum,
I
and
forgot.
it fuses their DNA. So I thought about that too. I was like, oh, it's like the Brundlefly, where it's like a fusion of two things, and it's like this walking
That's
fly
what I think
person.
Baxter Stockman is, but maybe I'm confusing the movie for the character. I don't know.
I know that's what I was thinking too. And then I realized that I think my only real experience with the character may not even be the cartoon. It's just like fighting him in the TMNT arcade games.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it usually says Baxter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I for some reason I thought they were one and the same. So that was a change for me, but I kind of chalked it up to, well, that's probably just because this is the comics and the comics are kind of
Right.
their own thing.
I did have an
Um,
action figure though. Wait, before you continue, I
oh
did have
yeah.
I did have an action figure once upon a time that I don't have anymore that basically was a scientist who turned into a fly because he's wearing like the white lab coat, but then he has
Oh
like the
yeah.
lab coat is ripped and fly flesh or I don't know, hair,
Yeah, yeah,
spines,
yeah.
whatever.
Fly
It looked like a
flesh.
bug was coming out of, yeah, coming out of a scientist uniform, and that was Baxter, or so I thought. Maybe that was someone Baxter mutated. I don't
I
know.
I think that it's likely that the animated series took liberties with the characters. And
Yeah,
so I think it's likely that the comic maybe had one version and then maybe they changed it when they made it a little more kid friendly and stuff. But
makes sense.
at any rate, it was
Tell us in the
interesting to
comments.
read it that way. Yeah.
So what about this, we kind of talked about the script versus written by.
Mhm.
Conversely, did it sort of like bother you that we had Krang again in this story, even though it wasn't Krang, or did that help kind of frame this story kind of like the first story was framed with, a retelling from a henchman?
So what's crazy is I skimmed your notes before I read it just to be like, oh, maybe I should keep these questions in mind kind of thing while I'm reading. And a few days before I read this, I've had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin in my collection for like, I don't know, months and
Hmm.
never read it. And I was like, maybe I should read it. Well, it's sort of the end point for, at least for IDW, for all of the stories that they've been telling in Ninja Turtles. And what's cool is in that story, in sort of the far future, Baxter is still there and he's older. And instead of Krang being in charge of him, it's like the person that's inherited the Shredder's mantle,
Mm.
but he's still stuck on this island, like the same island, Burnow Island, that he's in this story. And he's still experimenting on stuff. And he's still like, I absolutely hate this guy, telling me what to do. I want to be in charge. I want to push back.
Mm.
And so it was actually kind of cool to see that Krang had started doing that, knowing that he's going to end up in a different place with a different
Okay.
overseer later. So for this one specifically, because I had read that other story, I was kind of like, oh, that's neat to see that like he's always been in this place. And so when we get to the last Ronin, it makes sense why he's so like frustrated and angry and he's just
Hmm.
ready to lash out at anybody. And like the minute that the last Ronin, because which turtle it is kind of a spoiler, so I don't want to spoil that for people. But um, whenever he gets there, he's able to turn Baxter very quickly to his cause because Baxter's like, yeah, I hate that guy. Like I can't wait to get out there and do my own thing. So
Yeah.
in that respect, I kind of appreciated that Krang was there because it set up a dynamic with his character that was going to pay off in something
Hmm.
later.
That
So,
makes sense, and a lot more sense than just they were trying to do like connective tissue between the two. Because
mhm.
that's what I thought it was at first when I read this, is I thought, oh, we're just dovetailing from one issue to another. Well, that's kind of cool. Maybe we'll see Baxter in the old Hobbs, you know, in the background, or maybe he influenced him or something. But it didn't happen after. Well, I think he runs across him, but it wasn't as much, and then we
uh,
sort of lose that
yeah.
dovetailing later, so it's not really something that they're doing in the for each issue. So I think it makes a lot of sense that that's how they're kind of staging him, is he's almost like a sub villain, where
Hmm.
he if Krang would get out of his way, he could be a true villain, but he can never go into his true villainous potential because he's always under Krang's shadow. And that's kind of how we see some of these other characters like Alopex or
Hmm.
Karai, where they're definitely in Shredder's shadow. So
Yeah.
I think that makes it almost more interesting, because now you have kind of different levels of villains, where it's like you don't have, oh, who are the Turtles villains? Well, it's Krang, Baxter, Stockman, Alopex, blah 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 blah. Now it's like, well, there's the heavy hitters,
Hmm.
the kings, and then there's the sergeants and the generals and the peons after that. So it kind of like they have like a hierarchy of villainousness, which is cool.
Villainousness.
Villainousness. The name even hisses like a snake, so it's perfect for evil villainousness.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate seeing that variation in the different sort of tiers of villains.
mhm.
I do think with this one, I liked the framing device a lot more than I did in the Krang story
Yeah,
because it felt more substantial to
more relevant.
explaining who Baxter is. As far as like his father is trying to teach him to play chess really well, and he's like, "Oh, when you beat me, you'll truly have achieved a great intellect." Well, instead of learning how to beat his father, he learns how to like buy the company out from under
Yeah.
him, and that's how Baxter sort of gets one up on him. And it
Mhm.
was like, oh wow, like you're really doing some villainous machinations or whatever.
Villainousness.
Villainousness. Exactly. So that was a satisfying moment to see because his father was kind of a jerk too.
Well, and it,
So
it kind of makes him almost like similar to the Hobgoblin, the original one, in
Mm,
that he wasn't really as much of a villain, like in your face, let's fight. He was more in the behind the scenes, let me manipulate things to make them sort of work out for my advantage. And he would operate more in the shadows. Baxter's not really in the shadows, but as a scientist, it kind of is almost like he does that, where he would, like a fly on the wall, right? He would
sure.
create Flyborgs that could go out and they could kind of do reconnaissance and survey, and so his villainy could be more rooted in information, like
Hmm.
instead of Krang, who's more in like world dominance and things like that. So I think that makes it a cool kind of distinction. But do you think that Baxter himself sees himself as the hero of his own story, or is he really just kind of playing to win no matter the cost?
I think that there was maybe one line of dialogue, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I did read it a couple days ago, but I think there was one line of dialogue where he was talking about, well, Krang wants to terraform the Earth. That's kind of bad for not just me, but really everyone,
Hmm.
because then it won't be hospitable for humans. And so I'm not so much on board with him there. But it seemed like he was kind of hinting that he's like, well, I can improve the Earth. I'll just do it with me in charge. So it kind of felt like he was thinking of himself, maybe not quite as grandiose as Doctor Doom, but more of like, I'm going to bring all this science and stuff, but I'll
Hmm.
just leak it out a little bit at a time so I can get super rich at the same time, kind of
Yeah.
thing. But so I feel like he sees himself as, maybe he's doing a ends justify the means kind of thing where he's like, well, yes, I'm doing horrible mad science experiments, but it's okay because it's going to improve humanity in the long
Hmm.
run. That was kind of the vibe that I got from him.
Yeah, it
So,
kind of seems like not necessarily a hero, but he sees himself as like a protagonist of like, hey,
mhm.
I'm doing what should be done, which is merging flies, insects, and technology together, because that should exist. So I will make it so.
That needs to exist in the world, dang it.
All right. Anything else with Baxter before we fly on out of here?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
We like
Comics.
So everybody, up next we have Old Hob. This was written by Jason Chiaramella.
Sure.
Chiaramella, with art by Dave Wachter. Old Hob actually began his life as an ordinary house cat.
A
He had a
Catmandu.
home. A cat man do. Well, he's a cat that becomes a man, and then we'll learn about what he do.
Do.
He he had a home, plenty of food, and nice warm places to nap. But when his owner Billy, who forgets to clean his litter box, his
Billy.
mother his I know, Billy, it's all Billy's
He's
fault.
the real villain.
Billy's mother throws Hob out into the cold. So it was one of those typical, like, you said you were going to take care of that darn cat and you didn't do it. So I'm going to throw it out in the street. So that's what happens. So learning how to fight and survive in the streets, Hob eventually comes across four turtles that are covered in ooze, an ooze that burned Hob's mouth when he tried to bite them. And I think there was actually a comment about him being like, they were ugly, but I knew that they would still taste good or something like that. So he turned into this like scrappy alley cat that was getting all
Hmm.
scratched up and everything. And the turtles looked like something that would be great to eat. But before he could eat them, their rat protector attacked, injuring Hob and leaving him in a pile of ooze to die.
And bit out his
But
eye.
oh yeah, and Splinter actually does bite out Hobbs' eye during this exchange. So
Ay, ay, ay.
it's a pretty brutal fight that they get into. Hobbs survives this, however, and transforms into a walking, talking, angry mutant.
With
So
an eye patch.
as many characters do,
Arr!
he becomes the old Hob that we know as a more of a human-like physique. So now understanding human speech, Hobb runs across Baxter Stockman. Again, we're kind of following that through line of one character to the next, and he agrees to help him track down Splinter. However, Stockman experiments on Hobb instead of helping him settle the score with Splinter.
Yeah.
So finally convincing Stockman to let him out, Hobb begins to learn how to survive on the streets again, although this time more like a mob boss.
Yeah.
So realizing that most humans fear him, Hobb uses that fear to gain more turf, eventually heading an entire criminal organization. But he still didn't have the sort of like family and acceptance that the Turtles had with Splinter. So once he's like sort of this mob boss, he realizes that they're like all calling him freak behind his back and stuff. And he's like, well, I'm not content to, have these people serve me because they're kind of like not worthy. Like they're not, their loyalty is bought just because they're afraid of me, but they still talk about me. So he kind of realizes that humans will never accept him, and he decides to make a new army, one made up of mutants and test subjects like himself. And his first recruit is actually Toka, who you might know from the Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze.
And Razor! No, just Toka.
Yeah. So Toka, who's like gigantic for some reason in this. He's like thing-sized. But that's the framing device for this story is him sort of explaining like who he was to Toka and going like, you're also a test experiment. They gave you ooze through a needle, so maybe it wasn't as painful as me like, eating it or whatever, but you've been through experiments too, so you should join me. So yeah, that's pretty much who Old Hobb is and how he came to be.
Old Hobb. So
I guess the most obvious thing that I noticed is like he has the sort of same journey of self-awareness that the Ninja Turtles themselves go through, but he's missing that loving family aspect. He didn't have brothers. He didn't have like a father to raise him and teach him. He sort of had to fend for himself, and the first human that he encountered kind of made things worse by basically torturing him and trying to figure out like, well, how did he change like this? What does this ooze do? Let me shoot him up with more stuff. And it really made me think about like Magneto and the X-Men, because I was like, well, Old Hobb is kind of like Magneto, where like he got the powers, the same way as the heroes, but he grew up in this really brutal environment where like Magneto lived through the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't trust humans at all. And Old Hobb, basically all of his experiences with people were negative too. Whereas the Turtles are like, well, Splinter had a human father that had him as a pet that taught him ninja movements or something. And he was loving, but they had like more positive interactions. So it seems like the Turtles are the X-Men mutants and Old Hobb is Magneto, basically.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can kind of see that, especially because they are mutants in the turtle world too. But also, kind of like you said, it's like he kind of had the going it alone path, and it was a rough path that he went through on his own. And so the isolation and the pain kind of made him bitter against, and so he kind of did the like anti-racism where he goes, well, anyone who isn't a mutant is no good, so I'm not going to trust anyone. So he basically does the same thing to non-mutants that humans do to mutants. He just does it in reverse. And I think that's really the sort of character flaw that we see demonstrated here, where it's like, I learned that you can't trust anyone. You can't rely on anyone for help, and you always have to fight for scraps on your own. And that's, basically was his going of it. And so he does everything alone, but he finds other loners so that they can all band together and stand up for themselves, even though not all humans are bad, not all mutants are bad, but they kind of have that polarizing view. So I can kind of see the similarities there. I don't know as much about Magneto and his like personal struggles in the comics, if it's similar to that or not, but definitely what they showed us in the movies, it seemed a lot of like, especially the testing and the being subjected to like military and labs and all this other stuff, and coming out of it going, all right, now that I'm free, what do I want to do? I want to reshape this world to be a world for mutants and get rid of all the humans, concentrate on all the humans now, concentrate and get them out of here.
Concentrate. It really did seem like that was what was kind of driving him. And I didn't feel it so much until he got to the point where he had his own gang and even they were rejecting him. Yeah. And then he was like, you know what? I'm just done with humanity. That's when I was like, oh, I feel like I've read something like this before or seen something similar to this before. And also, I should preface this by saying I am one of the worst people to go to for X-Men knowledge, most of it comes from the animated series and the movies, and I realized that that's not the main canon. So I've only read a handful of X comics, and most of them didn't feature Magneto. So this is just my understanding of his character based on how he's been portrayed in other media by like
Sure.
Ian McKellen and Fassbender and all of that. But I did like how he seemed to be kind of like a natural leader in that regard. He seemed, I don't know, almost like he came out of the gate more threatening than Krang or Stockman or anybody like that, because he seems to already be able to inspire people with either with fear or with loyalty, like right away.
Yeah.
And he's coming to Toka, and he's not going like, I'm going to force you to work for me. It's more like, look, I'm the only person that understands your struggle, so you should follow me. And he's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we've been through the same thing. And I don't know, in that regard, I thought like he felt really unique compared to the first two stories that we read.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it gives him kind of more of a reason to hate the turtles, because now they sort of embody the thing that he hates, because they save people, they like humanity, they
Right.
are antithetical to what he's trying to do, because we need to make the humans subversive, and here you are empowering them. Stop that. So and he's more ruthless almost than Shredder, because and has more motivation, because Shredder is a guy, and he
Right.
may apparently be a guy who died and was resurrected, but we'll talk about that in the Shredder up section. But
Yeah.
he's still a man, and
Right.
so that kind of like almost makes it like, well, is he the humans that hate mutants? So now he's going to be more of the like Magneto on the human side, and we're going to have these, kind of race wars and things like that. But I think that Old Hob has the edge, because he is a mutant and the turtles are mutants.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they're different sides of the same coin, whereas mutants and humans, there's more of a divide there, where they can't really understand each other as much as, they each can. So like having Old Hob recruit other mutants, and then having the Fearsome Five, or the Sinister Six, or, whatever they want to come up with, having them go head to head against the turtles, I think is way more compelling than having Shredder and the Foot going against the turtles, except for the rivalry between Shredder and Splinter when they were humans. So it's like it's a different angle that almost feels more threatening in some regards, which I like. After reading this, I was like, this is a cool character. Like,
It is.
I dug this cat. He's a cool cat.
I was really surprised by this one, because I was kind of like, oh, it's just going to be a house cat that mutated. Like, that doesn't seem that interesting. But when you get into his mindset and his ethos and everything, I was like, wow, he actually is a really good foil for these characters. And I'm amazed that I'd like never heard of him, never knew anything about him before, because he seems like a perfect fit for this universe. So yeah, this was definitely one of my favorites that I read, and it's not just because I own cats. It's because he like story-wise, he had a really good justification to be there.
Well, I don't own cats, and I have dogs, and I still thought this cat was cool. So there you go.
Yeah.
Two different perspectives, same conclusion.
So So the other thing that was different about this issue as compared to the other ones is that it actually ends in a cliffhanger where it looks like Old Hob and Toka are either trying to recruit the turtles or they're about to fight them. And it's a little bit unclear which is going on. How did you feel about them like ending it with see the conclusion in Ninja Turtles number 23 instead of just having like a hard endpoint for that?
So I actually was really happy. It made me extremely happy. And the reason is because looking at like Edge of Spider-Verse, where it's like, this is a really cool corner of this universe. This is a really interesting character, but it's a standalone. It's a one-time thing, and then that's it. And then maybe if it's popular enough, they'll write a series or they'll include that character in another event future down the road, whatever. But I like this because it's like, this is part of a larger story. And if you like what you see here, go read the main continuity. So now I have a reason to pick up Turtle comics, because I'm like, oh, apparently a character with the name of Old Hob, which when you hear Old Hob, you don't think, well, that sounds like a cool character. Oh, it's old man down the street. Okay, big whoop, whoop. But it's like the character is cooler than that. And now I have a reason to go pull out the comics and be like, oh, I want to see what happens with this character now. So I was really glad to see that because I was like, this character doesn't just exist here and only here. There's more.
Hmm. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. It did make me kind of go, especially because I've recently read The Last Ronin. And there were some elements in that story of things like there's a character called the Fugitoid or Dr. Honeycutt, and I was like, I don't know who this is. Who is this guy? Apparently he's in a whole bunch of the comics, but I had no idea and I had to look him up on the wiki. It's like I'm getting enough of these little scraps that it's making me go, Ninja Turtles comics are good. Why don't I read more of these? So
Yeah.
that it definitely worked to hook me. What I love the most about it though is that this is a mistake that a lot of serialized TV makes where and I'm sorry, but some of the worst offenders are Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, the non-episodic Star Trek shows, where they will give you an episode that does not feel like a full experience in and of itself. It's just there to lead you to the next story point
Yeah.
and to sort of kick the stone down the road of what's in the mystery box.
Who done it?
So what this does that I really appreciate is it tells a complete story in the flashback, and then it gives you the cliffhanger part
Yeah.
for if you want more. So you can still appreciate this as like a standalone comic, even if you don't read on. But if you want more, it's there.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like that's the best way to do serialized storytelling.
That's a really, really important and critical distinction, I think, that you just dropped there. Like, well, because if you only got part of a story and you're like, oh, this is cool, and then they're like, go check out our comic, you're like, okay, come on, you give me
Yeah.
this like little teaser, and now I have to go buy your comics to read more. But like you said, it's like here's a complete story, and if you like this story, there are more stories like this out there that you can read. And like you said it perfectly, it's the best way to do that. I agree.
Well, it's why I don't get excited about the free comic book day previews that like DC and Marvel will give out every year, because it's like you get maybe a third of a comic book issue, and then it's on to another third of a comic book issue, and it's trying to get you hooked on Batman and Flash and Superman, but what it really ends up being is just not enough of anything to really be substantial.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you can tell me a complete story in one issue that leaves me wanting more, then that's a much better way to sell me. So
Agreed.
We like
Comics. All right, so let us talk about Alopex. And I say Alopex because if you take out the LO, it spells apex, as in apex predator.
oh
So I figure her name is Alopex, even though it kind of looks like Alopex or Alopex
Alopex.
or
I was saying Alopex in my head.
Angela
but-
Lopex.
Angela
That's her
Lopex.
name. Lopex. Angela Lopex. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know.
this story was written by Brian Lynch, who wrote the micro series that we reviewed like 2 years ago.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then art by Ross Campbell. So Alopex is a mutant Arctic fox bursting on the scene like a full-on assassin to take out traitors of the Foot Clan that are selling secrets to rival clans. But she calls a timeout mid-fight, and she gives her enemies weapons that the turtles use, blindfolds herself, and imagines in her mind that she's beating the crap out of the turtles instead. So then she narrates her journey as she describes her sense of belonging with the Foot Clan, owing her life to Master Shredder, who turned her from a wild animal into a stone-cold, lethal assassin. He gives her a mission to destroy an old research facility in the Alaskan wilderness, which also used to be her home where she grew up and lived with her fox family. But now the Foot is her family. Ugh. The art has...
No thanks. I'm all the way out.
No feet. But I really wanted to call out the art in the story synopsis because we have
Yes.
this beautiful, like white and icy blue tones everywhere. And then as a major plot point happens, as Shredder destroys her old childhood home, everything erupts into red and yellow flames all over the page. And so it's like really cool to go from one extreme color to the next. And I felt like that really gave us the emotional impact of he has done something really, truly evil in this moment to this character. But he does it because he goes, "Congratulations! You have achieved the rank of my second in command," which is Chunin, which is basically a ninja term for second in command. So she is absolutely utterly devastated, which any normal person would be, lashes out at him. She gave him her loyalty and he repaid her with destroying the place that she was born. He praises
Well, and
her.
all the animals too, right? Like,
Yeah,
didn't all the animals and
everyone.
everything that was there
Yep.
die? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
horribly. But he praises her rage, but then he quickly puts her in her place, telling her she's acting like she's still one of them, but she's not. She's a foot now. She takes his hand, even though she's foot, she takes him by the hand and accepts her role as second in command, but she has this heavy disappointment and she knows
Mhm.
it. And so she will fight her way back into his approval. But then it hits her. Shredder is just like the old bear that used to terrorize her Fox clan when she was growing up. But this time, she's not going to run away. She's going to stay and kill the bear. So now
Mhm.
we get the story of a character who, again, sort of like Baxter, is subservient to another character, but also that I am going to play along with this, but I'm going to do my own thing. And so there's kind of like a lot to unpack here, but I wanted to start off with the beginning where she gave her enemies weapons and blindfolded herself mid-fight. Did that seem like cheesy to you? Like they were trying to convey to us, oh, she's really a bad A character because she can fight blindfolded? Or did it actually, do you felt like it made her look dangerous?
You know, what I actually love about that moment is that, as many people know, many people have talked about on the internet by now, the Ninja Turtles were originally very much a Daredevil parody. The
Hmm.
ooze goes in Daredevil's eyes, then it sinks down into the sewer and hits the turtles. I mean, that's basically what they
And he
depict in
fights the
the
hand.
yeah. He fights the hand, they fight the foot. He has Stick, they have Splinter. I mean, it goes like all the way down to like it's very clearly it was originally a pastiche of Daredevil that kind of blew up into its own totally unique thing. So this scene reminds me of almost one to one of a scene from Frank Miller's run on Daredevil,
Mm.
where the Kingpin is stripped down to nothing but like one of those sumo diaper things. I don't know what they're called. I call it a sumo diaper.
Sumer diaper
Um,
thing. Yeah.
but that's all he's wearing, and he's like, I want all of you to come at me, and he's like blindfolded himself, and it's just
Mm.
to show how big and tough he is, so he can intimidate everybody in his organization, basically. And he kills a whole bunch of his men that are coming at him with like katanas and all kinds of weapons. So to me, it was just sort of furthering that, like, yes, we know that it came from Daredevil, but it's its own thing, but we're still going to kind of pay homage to like a famous scene kind of thing. So
Mm.
that's what it felt like to me, was more of a like, this is kind of an homage to where the idea of the turtles originally came from.
Okay.
So
I think
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense because I was looking at it as it looked like she was giving them weapons that the turtles use, like nunchucks and katanas and
Mm,
sais and a bow staff, but it could have just been those are the weapons in this universe, so that's what they picked. But I was more thinking like because she was picturing them as the turtles. So I was like, what's her beef
right.
with the turtles? This like that opening scene made me think, what's her beef with the turtles? And then we didn't see a single turtle in the rest of the issue, and it was really Shredder that was the problem. So that scene kind of
Well,
confused me because I was like, well, what are we doing here?
I guess so. That begs the question: is she preparing to fight the turtles just because they're the mortal enemy of the Foot, or does she have some kind of personal vendetta with them? If I remember correctly, Alopex showed up or had her first appearance in the TMNT micro series that we reviewed
I think
a couple
so.
years
And didn't
ago,
she like
and
defect or
I
set a
think
trap or something?
so. I think so, but I don't remember exactly what her sort of role was in that series. But I do remember that she was in one of the stories about one of the
Hmm.
turtles. So, And I remember thinking at the time, hey, I wish I knew more about what her deal was. So if I had one criticism of this overall, it would be that, yeah, they don't really establish who the Ninja Turtles are to her. It's more of like who Shredder is to her and how she's sort of defined by him, and at first grateful, but then realizing, oh, he's not actually somebody that not only is he not worthy of her gratitude, but he doesn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't really care about it. He's just like, no, you're an amazing warrior, so you're my tune-in.
This is how you're
basically. And that's
useful in the way that
yeah,
I need you.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of whatever it is that you want to do. You're useful to me. Well, and
So yeah, I think as an homage, maybe it works, but as an actual like part of the story, I think you're right that it's like there needs to be more there.
because
So
I think for this story alone, if they had made her blindfold herself and imagine that every opponent she fought was Shredder, then that would sort of tie
yeah,
into the issue more. But maybe that doesn't fit her character more. Maybe there is a reason that it was the Turtles that we just don't see in this issue. I don't know,
yeah,
but that's how I felt reading this issue. Was from the beginning we said the Turtles, she was like, because it's one thing to be like, hey, I need to fight somebody. It's another thing to
sure.
blindfold yourself and imagine that every opponent is that, it's like the little dartboard that they put on the office of, the manager or a customer they don't like or something, and everybody's like putting push pins in it or throwing stuff at it. Like if you're going to have a target like that, it's going to be somebody that everybody thinks it, deserves it. And in her
Right.
mind, if that's the Turtles, maybe it was at the beginning and now maybe it's changed and it is Shredder now. Maybe that's the
Yeah.
other thing is she didn't at the beginning, she wasn't against Shredder. She was doing whatever he wanted. But now after this, a promotion, she's like, no, you can keep your
Mhm.
promotion. I don't like that.
I do think it's part of the if there is any kind of narrative through line to all these stories, I do think Alopex is definitely the first peek into the people working under Shredder at first think he's great, and then they gradually over time learn to realize that maybe I don't want this guy running the show. So I think that in that respect, it kind of ties into the larger stories nicely because that's what her journey is. And once we get to Karai, there's kind of a similar experience happening there. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like it didn't quite have as much depth as that one. What you said about the art, I just wanted to mention real quickly. The art in this one is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's it even looks like the style that everything is drawn in is kind of like almost a Japanese woodblock kind of style, where like the way Alopex is drawn in silhouette and everything kind of resembles Japanese art. And a lot of those sort of like ink drawings and things like that. And I think that it worked really well for this character. I was really happy with the choices that they made. So.
Well, and one of the things too was the original writer from the previous micro series was on this, and the original artist was supposed to be, but unfortunately passed away before the story was really ready to do any art.
Oh,
So
wow.
they partially, I don't know Ross Campbell, where he came from or anything, but because there's a part of one of the issues, I think that there's like a little letter that mentions, this is for the artist, because he wasn't able to do this and they really wanted him to because he had that kind of like classic look. So I think that Ross used that style, tried to draw in his style as like an homage.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because they, Brian, they like, I think they created the Alopex character for that micro series. Like that was the character's first, like they are the creators. So the creator artist was going to draw this and, wasn't able to. So they kind of, so I think that's why it's so,
I
like,
did
it
not
looks so
know
cool.
that.
And we see that distinction. I think it's really meant to, like, somebody really poured their heart into this.
Yeah. It's definitely a high point for the art in this series.
But something you mentioned earlier about Karai. So that was a question I had too, is okay, we have Shredder who hates mutants. So he picks
Hmm.
a mutant as his second in command. Why wouldn't like if he was a movie villain, he would call them freaks, these freaks like he calls Toka and
Yeah.
Razor. And why wouldn't he view them more as weapons rather and tools rather than giving them any sort of autonomy? Like you actually want this thing leading your people as second in command? No, this is a weapon. This is an assassin that you train and you send it out on missions. And if it's like the Suicide Squad, if it doesn't come back, then I just lost another mutant, big deal, because humans are what I care about.
Sure.
But he actually enlists her and actually does something in his mind to set her free, which is blowing up her childhood home. Because I think he's
Right.
looking at that and that's another question I had too, is like, is it a test? Prove yourself that you're still loyal,
Hmm.
even like, can I really it's like a dominance thing of like I can do whatever I want to you and you're not going to say a word. I blew up your childhood home and you're going to take it and you're going to still be loyal to me. Or are you going to fight back? Because if you're going to fight back and rebel, then I don't want you at all and we're just going to cut our losses now. So it seemed like it was a ninja
Yeah.
test, but then
It
why would
felt
he
like a
waste his time
test.
with a mutant and not a human like Karai? Karai's like the perfect. Why didn't you do this to her instead of Alopex?
Yeah, and maybe that part of the discussion we can save for Karai's issue itself. But this is the first of two female ninjas that we have in these stories that seem eminently qualified to take over the organization,
Hmm.
really, in Shredder's stead. It feels like Alopex or however we're saying it. It feels like she is very competent, very good at what she does,
Hmm.
and in a lot of ways would command more respect instead of, it's what is it Rufus says in Final Fantasy VII, where he's like, my father ruled the world through money, I'm going to rule it through fear. The Shredder rules through fear. It feels like people would actually be loyal to Alopex or Karai, as a sort of an honorable leader.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's almost like the Shredder values their skills, but in the back of his mind, he still sees them as a threat too, because
Yeah.
he's like, you're a little too good at what you do. So these tests and things, if it breaks you and you become, a better underling for me, great. If it breaks you in a way that you fight against me, well, then I don't have to worry about you anymore because now
Right.
we're just gonna sick the whole army on you. So it almost seems like it's win-win for him. Like no matter which way they go, he'll either reveal their true intentions or he'll have like a broken person that he can use more willingly.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's all manipulation. It's all his mind games and just trying to exercise more and more and more control
Yeah.
over his troops, it seems like. As for why a mutant, um, I don't know. The mutant that he uses in the next story, again, which we'll talk about soon, makes more sense to me than the choice that he makes here. So,
Yeah. And that's the thing that kind of like stuck in my mind is like, okay, if he was going to
mhm,
test her, why didn't he do that as part of initiation rather than saving it for promotion day? But also like maybe that was kind of the final holdout where it's like I hold all of the cards and here's the final one. Is that going to push you over the edge or not to test her loyalty?
right.
So I think that can be that is framed in a way that can make sense. But the mutant versus human thing was just sticking with me because I was like, why would he put
Yeah.
that much trust? Man, maybe the thing is he doesn't trust anyone. So second in command to him is really not second in command, but it's more just like position of, hey, you were close to me. So that way, when I need a ferocious weapon, because he respects power above all else.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
at the same time, he doesn't respect Splinter's power because he's his rival. So
Mhm.
anyone associated with him is a threat, but anyone associated with Shredder is a potential ally or weapon. So I guess it's
Yeah.
just getting inside Shredder's mind. So I think that in order to understand this story, you almost need to understand Shredder a little bit as well. Because
Yeah,
Alopex
I would say so.
and then her, like, why is she so loyal to Shredder? Just because he rescued her from what? The bear? So he rescued her from the bear and then became another bear in her life for her to take down. And that kind of establishes her as more of a almost like an anti-hero, where it's like because of the
I would say that
circumstances,
she is.
was pushed in one direction, but she's fighting to go another direction. She's the only one, I think, out of most of these characters that actually feels like she was given the choice and she didn't choose the evil path. And
Yeah,
there's
she
potential
feels
there.
like she could very easily have a redemption arc
Mhm.
coming, especially because of the events of this issue, even.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that is going to wrap up this episode, but we do have a part 2. So for now, make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel at Boneless Comics Podcast, where you can watch the video version of this episode so that you can see all of our cool turtle stuff that we have, or
Yeah.
Mike's shirt that he has that says "Say cheese" and it's got the
That's right.
turtles on it. Where's Donnie?
Donnie is on there. He's lower down.
Oh, he's underneath underneath the rotting pizza. Well, hopefully
He's underneath the rotting pizza. Yeah, it's Donnie at the bottom, and then I've got Raph, Mike, Leo. Yeah, Donnie's sort of like crouching so that they could get them all in on the shirt.
Gotcha. All right.
Well, again, be sure to tell us what your favorite TMNT villain is on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast, or on Blue Sky Social or X. At Boneless Comics 1. X. Use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to let us know what you think of Krang, Baxter, Stockman, Old Hob, and Alopex.
That's right. And also make sure you visit our website at bonelesscomicspodcast.com, where you can get additional info and a link to order Mike's banana designs from our Printify shop.
That's right. And our next episode is going to be part 2 of our review of TMNT Villains micro series, where we will discuss Karai, Hun, Bebop and Rocksteady, and the Shredder. So don't miss it.
That's right. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you right back here for part 2. Part 2.
All right. Part 2. All right.
We like
Comics.
because they have no